Good morning, my fellow general ed teachers. My name is S.Morgan, and I am going to present the following information about Arizona's language development approach to general classroom teachers into three different parts. Part 1 will focus on terminology. Part 2 will focus on the 4 principles of Arizona's language development approach. And Part 3 will focus on assessment and placement. After this presentation is over, if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to email me and we will correspond that way. Now let's start with part 1. The first question you may be wondering or have is, what is Arizona's definition of an English learner? Arizona's definition is anyone who has a native language that is not English, that has a difficulty in reading, writing, speaking, or comprehending the English language that limits their succession inside the classroom. The next question you may have is, what are the distinctions between the following instructional program models? ESL, English Second Language, Bilingual, Sheltered English Immersion, and Structured English Immersion, SEA. ESL is designed to improve those students whose first language is not English, to improve it by having different classes. For example, these classes will be arranged from basic to advanced and sometimes include learning the English language to assist students with basic services and even employment for when they get older. The next one is bilingual. Bilingual instructional programs and classes are designed to teach students in their native language and in the English classes as well. The next one is, what I want to talk about is, in a sheltered English instruction program, teachers use the English language as the medium for providing content area in instruction while adapting their native language to the proficiency level of all students. They may also use some type of gestures or visual aids to help their students understand this. And the last one is Structured English Immersion, also known as SEI. It's a very intense English language teaching program for students who do not speak English, designed to accelerate the learning of the English language, intended to comply with provisions of Title 15. You can find that in the Arizona. Okay? All right. Now let's move on to part 2. Part 2. Arizona's language development approach and the synthesis of the research around ELLs, English language learners. Arizona's language development has 4 core principles. Instruction should be research-based, which means your instruction that you have must be researched and it must have evidence to support it. Scaffolding, developmentally appropriate, and cultural/linguistically responsive. That is dealing with their language. The syntheses of the research around ELLs are for them to develop a sense of voice, confidence, and self-efficiency around their language use. Now let's move on to student agency and its importance in the instructions of ELLs. Student agency is being able to learn through instructional activities that are meaningful and relevant to the learners, that drive their interests, self-initiated, and have the proper guidance from their educators. Student agency is important to ELLs because it helps promote the students' engagement through the teaching and their learning process. All right, let's move to the next one. Explain each of the 4 principles. So this is where I'm going to explain the 4 different principles of Arizona's language approach. Arizona language Arizona language development has 4 core principles. The first one is Asset-based behaviors and expectations. This is dealing with the home language, and the cultures are assessed, and these are assessed by educators. To ensure that students' culture and linguistic assess our knowledge as well as respected. So we want to make sure that we are acknowledging their culture and their language during this time. The second one is integrated instruction in disciplinary language and content. This is where we meet or differentiate the disciplinary language instruction using the language of English proficiency standards. The third one is targeted and explicit language instruction. This is where we create opportunities for all students to use their language across their normal domains. And the fourth one is assessment, monitoring, and feedback. This is when we use the district or the teacher. These are the ones that create those formative and those summative assessments. They require the use of home language that is embedded in those content areas like reading, also known as ELA, math, science, social studies, those things like that. All right, the components of Arizona's approved research-based, this SEI, models are the newcomer, the pull-out, 2-hour, 50-50 dual language immersion. So let's start with the newcomer. The newcomer approved research-based SEA are that there must be 100 minutes per day for ELD time available for students that are in their first year that are identified as those pre-emergent ELLs. Now let's go ahead and move on to the pull-out approved research. The pull-out approved research-based SEI, are that student schedule must include at least 60 minutes a day, that is an hour, ELD time provided by an SEI teacher. Grade level teachers must provide at least 60 minutes, an hour, of some type of integrated language development. All right, let's move on to the 2-hour approved research-based. The 2-hour approved research-based SEI are that student schedule must include at least 100 minutes per day of the targeted ELD for all ELL students that are provided by an SEI teacher. English instruction must be integrated. So this is where we must include our English content, our English work inside the whole instruction, all right? Now let's move on to the 50-50 dual language immersion. This is where students must receive half of their native language content and half of the English content while inside the classroom daily. That is where that 50-50, half and half. Now let's move on to our final part, our part 3. All right, this is where we're going to talk about the process that is used to determine ELL program eligibility, placement, and reassessment, including the use of home language surveys and Arizona's English language proficiency assessment. The process that is used to determine ELL program eligibility, placement, and reassessment, including the use of home language survey and Arizona English proficiency assessment, is the AZELA, also known as Arizona English Language Learner Assessment. The AZELA, I'll pronounce AZELA, is a specific type of standards-based assessment that meets the state and federal requirements to measure the student's English language proficiency. Now we're going to talk about the standard accommodations available to ELLs for assessment. The standard accommodations available for ELLs for assessment are some changes to the presentation when the teacher is presenting. For example, the teacher will have to read it out loud instead of having the students to read it by themselves. So when they're administering a test, they're not just going to give the student the test. They're going to read the actual test out loud to them. That is an accommodation. Another accommodation will be the writing options. This means that the students will get assistance while writing. So during this time, the teacher may have some type of accommodation in front of the student's desk that helps them with their writing. For another example would be for the multiple choice test. So there will be, instead of having them writing, they'll have to bubble in with the multiple choice. Bubble in the A, B, C, or D. These things do not alter the assessment, nor changes the way the assessment is being measured. Thank you so much, and I hope you all have a great morning.